Hi, this is the lecture video for Chapter 19, the Sales and Operations Planning. And this is also relates to the manufacturing planning and the control stuffs. And the Chapter 19 is divided into three parts. The first part is actually the main part. So we discuss the sales and operation planning, which is SOP. And we will discuss four things, what's it, and an overview about SMP and what kinds of like the main factors it includes. And then we discuss more details about SNOP, which is the aggregate plan. And then we move to the strategies, like in general, when we develop an AP. And the second part talks about techniques. So the techniques, like for the previous chapters, is the main part for that chapter if the chapter has the tools. But for the chapter 19, we will skip all the math because like this is something we have already learned, or the tools we've already learned, or like something like you can just like read the textbook to take a look at the examples and then you will be able to figure them out. So we have three techniques here. The first one is cut and try charting and graphic methods. We should use some graphic or the Excel spreadsheets to try the different like the plans, then to make the decisions to choose the best aggregate plan. The second is the linear programming, we just learned for the chapter 15. And for the chapter 15, we use linear programming to help us to find optimal solutions with the transportation. And now we just use the linear programming as well to find an optimal plan for the sales and operations. And the third one is simulation. Simulation is also kind of like a widely used method to help us to try to check like the different plans over there. And the last part is the yield management, which we will discuss for some special or the specific industries, what they did for their sales, what they consider and how they consider for their SNOP plan. So this is all the contents we learn for the chapter 19. So now let's take a look. What's it? So sales and operation planning, or we call it the aggregate operations plan, because this SOP is actually focuses on the main logic here is balance the supply and demand. And the balance of supply and demand in operations management, we use aggregate plan. So we also, here we just like discuss the aggregate operations plan. This is kind of translates the plan, which relates to the annual or the quarterly business plans into the broad labor and output plans for the intermediate term. So one keyword here, the aggregate plan is intermediate term plan. It's not like for next month, it's not like for tomorrow, next day. It's actually for the next 3 to 18 months. So this is the first thing you need to remember. This is kind of like the time range for this plan. And it will help us, help the companies to deal with the customer service, inventories, the lead times, the production stuffs, and others. And most of the situation, it consists of a series of meetings because this actually align with the strategy part. So this is kind of like when you plan something, but it will be finished with a high level meeting, like with all the important decisions are made. And another key things like you need to figure out is all the aggregate plan, or what we call the sales and operating plan, is actually focuses on group of products. We never make this kind of plan for a single product. Okay. And this slide give you an overview about like the main activities like in terms of operation supply chain planning. So the sales and operation planning is over there. So this is kind of a medium range plan. And the long range plan is kind of like what we learned for the first chapter 1, 2. which we discussed the overall business strategy. We discussed the competitive advantages of a business, which provides you an overall direction you need to go. But after that, we break down. Then we focus on the sales and operations. We make aggregate plan to design the sales and the operation staffs over there. So this is what we call medium range. And we also have some short range here. So it relates to the manufacturing, the short range plan relates to the detailed schedules for the purchase and materials, for the schedules for the production and people, and the order scheduling is over there. So this is what's like kind of other major activities here. And the first thing you need to figure out is what I just introduced, the major activities. Then the second thing we need to figure out what does mean long range, medium range, short range. In general, the long range means is kind of like the time horizon is greater than 1 year. In the past, like 20 years ago, probably when we talk about long range plan, it means like the plan for the next 5 to 10 years. But nowadays, like we probably talks about some long range plan for next 2 years. So it's more than a year, but it doesn't mean like you make a plan for next 2 years and you've done. No, you need to keep like the regular checking. So you really like you need to perform annually and you need to check them annually. And for the intermediate range planning, it's kind of like for 3 to 18 months, which means like less than 2 years. And it's kind of like the time increments is weekly, monthly, quarterly. So you probably need to check them like every month. You need to hold another meeting to check where are you going now and if everything aligns with the plan you make and anything you need to improve, anything you need to change, anything you need to catch up. And this is like kind of like time increments meetings like for the intermediate range planning. And short range is for short time, so it's kind of weekly, monthly, or daily. And the most of the short range planning like we discuss here, like the daily schedules like for people and production. This is like you need to make a really detailed schedules like for a specific equipment or for people, for the employees to work daily. So this is what we have. And back to your previous slides here, this is actually give you kind of like a summarization of SOP. And just like I mentioned, SOP, this is actually coined by companies to refer to aggregate planning, which focuses on balancing the demand and the supply. So this is the first thing you need to keep in your mind. And then it's actually a cross-functional work. It's emphasized, it will help you to just like get that sense about like how important the cross-function work is. It is by actually product families, so we never make this plan for single product. And for kind of like the aggregate options plan is a optimal combination about your production rate, about your workforce level, about your inventory on hand. So those three things actually represent the capacity you have and they will represent the supply. So if you think back, like for any AP here, we just want to balance the supply and demand. So if you kind of like have an optimal combination of all the capacity you have, you will be, which means like you have like get a really great plan to balance the what you have to support what the customer wants. In general, we try to change like the internal stuffs, like our capacity stuffs to balance the supply and demand. Like we want to change our workforce, we just change the inventory, we keep some safety stock or other measures to just like try to balance the supply. But in some firms, we can also try to change the demand. So this slides gave you like some internal a company like when remains the supply stuffs, and this is some extra. And sometimes we can also try to change the demand. Like for example, you probably have already, I mean, met some advertisements, means like buy one get one 20% off. This is kind of some like the promotion stuffs to change the demand for the customers. And we also have other ways like change the lead time, change like some special like the some resorts which focuses on providing customers the snowboarding experiences. They also provide some summer activities to change the demand overall. So for some companies, yes, we can change the demand, but when we consider how to like develop an AP to balance the supply and demand, we consider like most of the time we consider for the internal sides, like to change your workforce, to change your inventory, to change your production rate. It's in general we have two actually main strategies for AP, the aggregate part. We have a chest strategy, we have a level strategy, and we also have a special strategy we call stable workforce. So what they are, the chest strategy means like you change your capacity, like you change your workforce, you hire people or lay off people to meet exactly the demands like the customer wants. For example, if the customer wants 20 units and each people can produce 2, then you probably need 10 employees. And next month, if the customer changes their mind, they need 30. So you probably need to hire another 5 employees. Then this is what we call the chase strategy. You always like to meet the demand. You always want to catch up the demand. So you just change your workforce or your production rate or other capacity to meet the demand. On the contrast, the level strategy means like you keep a really, really stable workforce or the stable capacity to produce like, for the next year, the whole year, the demand is 120. So which means like every month if you can produce 10, then as a whole year, you will be able to meet the 120 in total. But we know that like for every month, the demand may change. Like just like ice cream, summer they need a lot, winter they need less. So even like okay, in total it's 120, but for some month they need 20, they need 30, they need 50, but for some month they only need 5. But anyways, if if you choose level strategy, you don't catch that demand for the specific period. You just keep a stable workforce, stable capacity, stable production part over there. And a stable workforce means like you don't need to hire or lay off employees to change the demand, but you just provide a variable working hours for them, like the flexible work schedules or ask them to work overtime. So this is kind of like those different strategies. If you only apply one of them, this is what we call a pure strategy. And if you, use more than one of them, is kind of like a mixed strategy uses. And except for those 3 basic strategies, we also can do some subcontracting stuff to change your workforce. Like you hire some part-time, you don't have to like hiring or laying off people because they are actually expensive. So you can just have some subcontracting workers to help you to change the capacity, to change your supply, and then to meet the demand. And for the aggregate planning, we need to consider the 4 following costs. The first one is the general production cost, which relates to the materials, which to probably the fixed or the variable cost. And the second is kind of cost related to change the production rate or the workforce, like the cost for hiring, training, laying off, as well as the holding cost for inventories, which is the third types of the cost. And the back order cost, which means like you don't have enough inventory, the customer asks 20, you only have 10, then you have 10 back orders. This is kind of like also you need to spend some money like to cover it. This is kind of what we call the back order costs. And a great AP will help you to earn what you are asked for. So the operation managers are generally required to submit annual budget request. And the AP will be the monkey to help you to getting the budget you may like. This is kind of like a great AP will increases like the possibilities you receive the requested budget. And so let's move to the second part for the techniques of AP. So we have the first one, cut and trend charting and graphic methods. This actually just like you have multiple like the planning alternatives and you want to select which one is the best, and then you just try the different plan and then to find like which one will help you to save money. You can use a spreadsheet to do that. You can use other tools or softwares to help you to do that as well. Linear programming is kind of like the tools we will be able to determine an optimal plan, while simulations is actually kind of what if analysis, like just like applied to the different scenarios and to evaluate like the performance for all the alternative you have. And another thing I'd like to introduce for chapter 19 is the yield management. This is actually the process of allocating the right type of the capacity to the right type of the customer and the right place and time, and to maximize the revenue or yield. And most of situation, like for some specific industries, they apply this yield management or not. For example, the airline industry. So when you probably have that experiences, like if you booked the flights like a month ago, then you probably will experience this kind of a lower price. But if you just like book the flights like 2 days ago, probably is the most expensive timing to book the flights. And I also read kind of like some reports. The Tuesday will be the best day a week to book flights or the hotel rooms. And so this is kind of a year management. And this is actually a really, really powerful approach to making demand more predictable. And it will also to help to maximize the profits considered for the company's perspective. And it has already existed as long as they have like if the capacity is limited to serve the customers, they can apply the yield management. A very popular and widely used application is for the American Airlines, what we call the SABRE. And if you want to apply the yield management successful, it should meet the following five requirements. So first of all, the demand should be able to be segmented by customers. So you need to be able to segment the customer into different groups. And the fixed costs are really high and the variable costs are low. The inventories is perishable. The product can be sold in advance and the demand is highly variable. And we will use hotel as the example to explain those five. So first of all, the hotels offers kind of like this one set of rates during the week and another sets during the weekend. So the price is kind of like different. So this what we call it can be segmented. And we know that the construction fee to construct the hotels like that buildings, buy all the mattresses and all the related equipments, the system like into them buildings to make that hotels looks fancy, or to make them buildings like to just like begin your hotel business is really expensive. You need to invest tons of money. But like this is what we call the fixed cost relates to this hotel, industry. The variable costs relates to hotel industry, like the cleaning costs. If you need to clean one room, so this kind of change. And we know that the cleaning cost compared with the construction cost is really low. So this is like makes the second key requirement here. The fixed costs are really high, while the variable costs are low. And the available rooms cannot be transferred from line to line. So this is what we mentioned. The inventory is kind of perishable. The blocks of the rooms can be sold to conventions or tours. This is actually, it could be booked in advance. So this is, you can sell that products in advance. And the demand is highly variable. So the potential guests may just cancel or may not show up. So it's kind of the demand is actually variables. And the hotels like meet all the 5 requirements. That's the reason like why they are able to apply the yield management successful. And if you want to operate the yield management system, so you also need to consider the following stuffs like the price and structure should be kind of like a logic to the customers. It's this is like what we have the common sense, like if we book the flights or the hotels like just one day before, it probably will be more expensive if you have a whole travel plan like a month ago, or if you like for different like the rooms, like the hotel rooms is if it is ocean view, it probably will be more expensive than kind of like rooms without any scenarios over there. So it's kind of like we have the price, logic, and customer understand it. And the variability should be handled like in different arrival, starting times, duration between customers, and it's also need to handle like the service process, like you need to train. This is also relates to the fourth one. So you need to train the employees to work in that environment because the demand is really variables. Like if overbook happens, if the price changes, then the service stuffs you should be like your employees should be trained like to meet those complex scenarios. And this is what we have for the Ch19.